It's been growing since 1967. Toronto's Stanley Cup tree. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week I have a number of subjects I'd like to cover. Obviously the cartoon of the week, as I'm starting to follow the Stanley Cup as it's within basically a dozen games of completing its regular season. And then, of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs begin. And the reason why I have really shown an interest this year is because Toronto is one of the top teams in the league. And I was doing some research on it, and I thought it would be fun if I went through Toronto's terrible history since their last Cup victory way back in 1966-67, a year I don't even remember following in hockey. And I know that's so because I was taken aback at some of the players, especially one guy in particular who was on that Toronto roster, and that was Frank Mahovlich, a guy who has been an eternal nightmare for me ever since 1971, having a big goal in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final between the Canadiens and my beloved Chicago Blackhawks at the time. He caused me so much angst. I basically cried myself to sleep, and I stopped following hockey for about the next 4 or 5 years, all because of Frank Mahovlich and his brother Pete. I have to put that in there too. I was really amazed at the fact that the Mahovlich, or Frank Mahovlich, played both for Toronto and Montreal, because to me, that's like playing for both Boston and New York, the Red Sox and the Yankees. Even though it's been done successfully, but not by too many people. The only guy who I can think of that was both successful with the Red Sox and, of course, the Yankees is Babe Ruth. Yes, you could argue that Lyle had a couple of good years with the Red Sox and then has his sparkling Cy Young and a great career with the New York Yankees. That Cy Young coming in a year when the Yankees win their World Series, 1977, for the first time since the early 60s, actually 62. So not too often where a player goes from one rival to another, to their bitter rival. And when I saw that Mahovlich was on that, because I got to be honest with you, this is the month for Jackie Robinson. One of the reasons that Robinson retired from the game was that the Dodgers had traded him to the New York Giants. And the Dodger-Giant rivalry was such that to go there was really a jolt, probably to his ego, to his pride, and also to, wait a minute, you're trading me to the enemy after all these years. Robinson retired rather than go to the New York Giants, and eventually would become the San Francisco Giants. So it's not unheard of to go to the rivals. I just couldn't believe that Toronto and Montreal, who I would consider bitter Canadian rivals. Remember, they were the only 2 teams in Canada of the original 6 at the time. So naturally, you would have a rivalry there just built up nationally. And of course, both had great hockey franchises, both clubs dripping in tradition and all things hockey. But I do also want to talk about this. We did a Hammer and Hank tribute to the great Hall of Famer and arguably one of the great players of all time, depending where you put him. He might be in some people's top 5. He might be in some people's top 10. He definitely is and should be, without a doubt, in everyone's top 25. I don't think there's an argument that can be made there. Because, and I said, I think the biggest problem with Hank Aaron, he was so consistent that he was boring. I think that we really took his performance on the field for granted. And yes, he didn't play in the big media markets as well. But in that show, I had mentioned, and I wish I had it for the show, that I actually had a poem about Hank Aaron. I guess I was always thinking, eating, and sleeping sports. And we had to do, the theme was spring. So we had to write a spring poem. And I chose to write it about Hank Aaron. And it won. it didn't win first place, but it got honorable mention. And I had said that I had it published. I remember it was published. And then I was thinking, oh man, I must be a liar. I must be dreaming, because I couldn't find it. I was able to locate a site that gave me the papers, and I went through it. It took me quite a few hours. And then it dawned on me, I wonder if the work was published before April and May. Usually, the town newspapers, the news that you get, especially on the local or community or school, it's always like a month behind. And it was no different for me growing up in my town. But interestingly enough, this poem was published April 4. Our paper, our town newspaper, actually in conjunction with another town, came out every Thursday. And it was actually published April 4th. That's the Thursday edition, 1974. I did tell everybody I knew what year it was because I was graduating. And of course, Aaron sets the record in 74, breaks the record as well. And the poem, though, came out 2 days, or was published 2 days after he ties him in Cincinnati, I believe, but 4 days before he breaks the record. So I'm saying to myself, how prescient I was. I was actually predicting it, and it was published that week. That's how I look at it. But anyway, if I can, please save all your laughter for when I'm off the show. I don't mind then. All right. This is a 13-year-old's attempt at paying tribute to one of his favorite players growing up and collecting those great baseball cards, and just saying, man, one day I would just love to be able to hit the ball like Hammer and Hank. Hammer and Hank, look, the crowd says. The ball soars up over and out of the ballpark. It's Hammer and Hank, the crowd exclaims. He's just hit the greatest home run ever. As he circles the bases, the crowd cheers and cheers with joy in their hearts. Now Hank has reached home base with the knowledge he's broken the Babe's home run record of 714. Second place, and it got published. Of those things, this occurs, going on TV like this. Anyway, that's my tribute to Hank Aaron as a 13-year-old. But no rhyme or reason. Probably was something I came up with real quick. Maybe I know I was the only winner in my 8th grade class, probably because I was the only entrant and they had to have a winner from the graduating class. But Hank Aaron, the only thing I can say is the tribute is sincere. I was rooting for him. I probably remember the guts of that, and I've told you how often. The only thing I didn't put in there, and I was kind of glad, as he circles the bases and reaches home plate, he has just broken Babe Ruth record. I was so glad that the crowd stayed in, at least in my poem, in the stands and didn't run and chaperone him around the bases like those two people did. I'd like to call them, well, I'm just going to say that to me, I always felt that they ruined one of the greatest moments in baseball by trying to be part of history instead of being apart from history and letting Aaron just bask in his own glory, which he deserved. Anyway, that's my little opinion for today. Now, before I go into baseball, I was thinking about this the other day, and so often we talk about, the heroes of the game. Well, I'd like to talk about some of the footnote players in history as well before I get into that. And so I was looking at MLB Network. I go online to follow each day the box scores. I like to keep up with it and all the rest of it. And they had basically a standings of, let's say, the top 10 players. And I got to be honest with you, some of the guys I didn't know, so I really have to familiarize myself with it. And the last guy on the spot was a player, an infielder for the Miami Marlins. And his name, of course, let me just get it here, is Chaz Chisholm. Well, why I say it's an old picture is because Topps did it kind of like a retro. Those are like the 1968 ones. And of course, he is with the Miami Marlins. They're wearing kind of like those retro jerseys that kind of indicate or symbolize teams from the area, from years gone by. I was looking at this guy, Chaz Chisholm. Now he's up. He's having a very good start to the 2021 season. And then I was looking, and it said he was from the Bahamas. And I have to be very honest with you. I've been to the Bahamas. There's not much land there. I didn't see too many baseball fields. So it really got me thinking, how many baseball players have made it to the major leagues from the Bahamas? Now, I did go to Wikipedia. So there might be another site that might have more. I counted about 5 or 6, so I was able to do some research on each of them, and I'd like to present that today. One guy does have a significant part in baseball history, so I'm going to save him for last. And also, that same guy has a rookie card, which ties in with my hometown. So it's kind of interesting how one thing works into another. But before I get into that, I just want to go over Toronto Maple Leafs. I know maybe my audience isn't a big hockey, big NHL fan base, but like me, you probably do have some interest in it come Stanley Cup time. Let's face it, at least here, I do another a podcast in Canada or for a Canadian website, and I was making the claim that this one thing about North American sports and it's really been when I was growing up, we went from basically each sport having its own season to now each sport encroaching on the others. Not only encroaching, but expanding their seasons, expanding their playoffs, expanding their coverage. Basically, all of the sports have become 365, which makes it kind of difficult to follow them all at once, especially if there is one sport that you have a particular interest in. And that's why many of these sports writers become niche reporters. They really focus on one particular sport because it is very difficult to follow baseball, football, basketball, the NHL, the college, football, and basketball seasons. And then if you are a golf fan or a racing fan, or a horse racing fan, you get the picture. There's so many. I have to be honest with you, I've been getting into curling lately. I've been following that. It's shuffleboard on ice with the little brooms. It is kind of exciting in its own way. And I guess it's perfect for me as I'm getting up there in age that it's maybe something I can do if I can find a rink to participate. But there you are with these big rocks, and you're shuffling them down on ice instead of a wooden board. And I'm surprised that cruise ships don't have it just yet. I am sure they will, because I have been on a cruise ship with an ice skating rink, and really, maybe the sport grows where they have a curling tournament on these cruise ships. It would be unbelievable. But anyway, I was looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs. I keep calling them the Blue Jays. And I think one of the reasons why they kind of hold a special place in my heart is because they are the revenge of kids in grammar school against their grammar school English and grammar teachers, in that I always love when the teachers used to say, this is how we pluralize singular words this way. And then you come up with the exception. Well, teacher, what about Maple Leaf? They are the Toronto Maple Leafs, not Maple Leaves. And of course, being so smart and smug, I wound up getting punished by staying in at recess because I would subvert the teachings of the teacher. Anyway, it was interesting that the Maple Leafs, when I was looking at this, I went all the way back to 66, 67 when they last won their championship. And I didn't realize this. They finished third that year in a 6-team league. So there's 4 teams that make it. Okay. So it is easier theoretically to win. They only played 70 games. But that Maple Leaf team had a number of Hall of Famers on it. I'm going to get into that in a second. But this is how bad they've been. They are the last of the original teams to have won, let's say, since that time, or even smelled the Stanley Cup Finals. Because in this time, from 66, 67. The Rangers won in 94. They've gone to a couple of finals. The Canadiens, of course, dominated the 70s. The Bruins would win. The Chicago Blackhawks would end their drought from 61, 62. And, of course, the Detroit Red Wings were just a power in the 90s. So the original six, we're still waiting for the Maple Leafs to break through in, let's say, the last 50 years. You're talking about half a century. And in that time, they've made 33 postseasons, or 33, 32 postseasons. I'm not going to do the math real quick here, but just to give you an idea of how the NHL, and this shows you how it's expanded, how the format of the playoffs have changed and have also expanded. So they've gone to 4 and they've quadrupled it. Now there's 16 teams that make the NHL. And of course, there's 31, soon to be 32 teams. That's gone up 8 times as much in those 50 years. But just going through this, since their one Stanley Cup, here's what they've done. They've lost 3 NHL division semifinals. They've lost 2 NHL division finals. They've lost 3 NHL conference finals. And they've lost 2 NHL conference quarterfinals. Then they've lost 2 NHL conference semifinals, 2 NHL conference quarterfinals, 3 NHL first rounders, and last year they lost a preliminary round. In other words, they've been 0 for 33 in all these years. 5, 9, 14, 19. Oh, wait, I have to add. They've lost an NHL quarterfinal 8 times. They've lost an NHL semifinal 1 time, and they've lost a preliminary 2 times. So you're talking about 11, 14, 16, 21, 25, 26, 30, or whatever. I think I have it as 1 in 32. They've made 32 postseasons, and including the 66, 67 Stanley Cup, like 1 in 32. But the jargon, the terminology of all the names of the playoff rounds has expanded, has changed after all these years, and it still comes up the same for the Maple Leafs. A big goose egg, 0. But I was looking at that 66, 67 team, and I believe the Topps cards I'm going to show you is a list of 4 guys who played on that 66, 67 squad. 3 of them I know are in the Hall of Fame. And the other one I love because it was a card I found. His name is Jim Pappin, excuse me. And let me just find him real quick here. I'm using this. Yeah, Jim. Yeah, he's a 2-time Cup winner. Doesn't make the Hall of Fame. I just loved it because, like anything that Topps does, it's amazing. And of course, there's Frank Mahovlich. Let's skip him for a second and just go to Pappin. Now, why I like this card so much and why I brought it up is take a look. He's in a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey. But the logo in the back is the Chicago Blackhawks. So he'd been traded, and the Topps card didn't even bother to even color in the Maple Leaf there. By the way, I don't know about you and how much you follow the hockey, and I think, no, I didn't. I would love to do that. I've done the NHL logos. I would love to do the jerseys, because one thing I like about the NHL, they have great logos for their teams, unlike basketball, which is the worst. And maybe soccer as well. And that's another sport that many people are following now. But I love the uniforms in hockey. And 2 of my favorite are the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings, because they're only 2 colors. For the Red Wings, it's red and white with that great wheel with the wing on it. And for the Maple Leafs, now I do like this one better than the more ornate one. And I'm going to show you Terry Sawchuk, the very ornate one that they're wearing today. This is more of the throwback. This you would probably consider more of the modern look of the Maple Leafs. But just from a case, I just remember this one as a kid and just always thought that simple version of the Toronto Maple Leafs logo with, of course, the Canadian Maple Leaf logo. I just thought it was simpler and it really stood out more than the one that they are currently using. But what do I know? I'm not a fashion expert. Do like the Red Wings. There are some that were just terrible. I think many of the modern ones with the NHL teams, especially Carolina, never really, well, I can do a further show on this, but the Carolina logo was never too crazy about it, even though it's the eye of her. I just thought it was just too much red and black. Love the Blackhawks. And in fact, I'm probably one of the few that actually like their white uniforms better than I do their red uniforms, because I always thought the Blackhawk logo looked and stood out more on the white jerseys than the red ones. And that drives me crazy right now too. And I think I've mentioned this in the past, is that I was so used to the home whites in sports and the road jerseys being in color. Now it's been switched. And I tell you, it still kind of confuses me. So when I see the Blackhawks wearing the white, I'm thinking that they're home, and they're not. They're on the road. So it's kind of crazy. But anyway, I was looking at this. Tim Horton, of course, I know him better with the donuts. And of course, you see Tim Horton donuts being as an advertisement on the boards in the hockey arenas. And of course, above that, Terry Sawchuk, who I did or was familiar with. Didn't realize this, though, the number of teams that he did play for. I did kind of recall him playing for Detroit. As the card attests, I really knew him more as a Maple Leaf. Hall of Famer, led the league with Detroit a number of times in wins with over 40 3 times. I think he had 40 and then 44, 44, and 44, something like that, during the 50s. Just an amazing. Then goes to the Maple Leafs, wins a title there. He actually retired, didn't realize this, with the New York Rangers. He finished his career. But that year, he was kind of amazing. Never realized that Gary Unger was on that Maple Leaf team of 66-67. I remember Unger as being probably one of the stars of the early expansion St. Louis Blues. And in fact, I'm just going to take a look. Never made the Hall of Fame. He goes to Detroit and then goes to St. Louis and plays for them. He is an early star for that St. Louis team. He missed their Stanley Cup finals. Would have been interesting had he been playing for them. Led the league in games played a number of times. And here's Gary Unger. And I don't have a card for him. So anyway, the Maple Leafs finish in third place, 1966-67. They're only 32-27-11. The other team that made it were the Rangers, the Blackhawks, and the Canadiens. And he wins, Terry Sawchuk we're talking about now. He wins 16 games on that team as a 37-year-old goalie. Does kind of, goalies, and this is why I like the goalies so much. They're kind of like the aging pitcher who has been toiling for, let's say, maybe a bad last place team for the last 5 years. And now it's time to move him on as the team rebuilds. And so they trade him to a pennant contender for a couple of minor leaguers or a player to be named later or cash. And he does enough to get that team into a playoff spot or even into the World Series. In a lot of ways, and I'm thinking a little bit like David Cohn, but I'm thinking of older pitchers who did that. Trying to think, well, and I'm only thinking of guys who were traded. George Stone, not so much a journeyman. The 73 Met team, of course, he won 12 games, his greatest season ever. Kind of helps out the Mets get into the World Series. I'm thinking this. It'll probably come to me. I'm just thinking of maybe some great Yankee teams where they traded for a crafty lefty or a really good right-hander, bringing them in and all the rest of it. And of course, some of the names are just right now escaping me. I'll probably think of it as we go on. All right, I'll give you this. There were some kind of journeyman good pitchers, kind of like Jim Mudcat Grant, who kind of winds up his career with Pittsburgh after having some stellar years with the Minnesota Twins. He was on that 65 pennant winner. Actually, I think he led the team in wins that year, not Jim Cott. Jim Cott is another example of a kind of guy like that wound up. I remember growing up, Woody Fryman did some nice things for the Detroit Tigers in the 72 season. Not a great pitcher, mediocre at best, but he's kind of like that veteran pitcher. Well, the goalies are the same way. And of course, the examples I gave are not Hall of Fame pitchers per se, but I think you know what I'm talking about. That goalies, like these aging pitchers, they seem to be traded or wind up on a team that has a chance to go far. And Sawchuk pretty much realized that. He won 16 games that year for Toronto. Remember, that's half the games he won for them as he helped them win their last Stanley Cup. Why I'm bringing up Toronto right now is that I didn't realize this until I was doing the research. First of all, the guys, Frank Mahovlich, Tom Horton, Terry Sawchuk, they surprised me, especially Mahovlich being on that team. But the other thing that I was amazed at was how few years Toronto really had the outstanding record in the league. They've only had 4 seasons where they surpassed 100 points. Now, 100 points, you get 2 points for a win, 1 point for a tie. All right. So 80-game season, kind of easy to do. If you win 40 games, that's 80 points right there and maybe 20 ties. So you're going 40, 20, and 20 or 40, 22, and 20. And yes, I know that the NHL only played 70 games for a while and all the rest of it. But I was amazed at the fact that Toronto only had 4 seasons where they won 100. Why, again, I'm bringing this up is that if this season, which is only 56 games for a complete season, if this game had been played to the 82, Toronto would have 111 points and 55 wins, which would be the best in their franchise history. Incredible. And that's why I guess, not so much touting Toronto, but kind of like on them right now to see what kind of damage they can do in the Stanley Cup and if they can get finally to the promised land and the Stanley Cup finals at least, because this may be the year, this may be the golden opportunity for the Maple Leafs to finally end that long slump and bring back the Stanley Cup to Toronto. All right, so turning to baseball a little bit, I was looking at a number of players from the Bahamas and came up with this. Wikipedia has a list of the players, and I just like to do a couple of things with them. One actually played for the Yankees, and that was this player right here. Let me just put on my glasses because it's kind of hard to see the writing. Adrian Robertson, or Andre Robertson. All right. He came up for a few years. This, of course, is a minor league picture of him. I couldn't find with New Britain Rockcats, I couldn't find a Yankee or a Topps baseball picture of him in a Yankee uniform. But he did have a cup of coffee at least in the Bronx and with the Yankees. The guy up here, and before I forget this is why this is so wild. That's Ed Armbrister. And of course, he's probably the most famous of all the players from the Bahamas. And with that guy on the rookie card, he actually has 2 rookie cards. This one, though, is special to me because the fellow who's with him grew up in my hometown of Verona. And he was kind of a local legend, Mel Bainey. And I think he pitched a total of 3 innings in the major leagues. He came up actually in 70, and I think he had a cup of coffee in 71 and maybe 72. I think he had arm trouble. But here he is on a rookie card with Ed Armbrister. And of course, Armbrister Another thing about him as I was reading, didn't realize this, his major league debut came as a pinch hitter for the Cincinnati Reds. He actually pinch hit for Pete Rose, the all-time hit leader. Can you imagine that? Struck out, but in his next at-bat, not in that game, he hits a home run. But, of course, he's most famous for the World Series play where he bunted the ball, and I'd love to be able to find that if I can. He bunted the ball. He actually finished with a 245 batting average and only 4 home runs and a -1 WAR. He actually played 5 years in the major leagues at Armbrister with 19 RBIs total. And he had 46 runs scored. But it was his play in the 75 World Series that was the most important. And that happened in Game 3. And just to refresh everyone's mind, it went to extra innings, Game 3. It was the bottom of the 10th. Ed Armbrister came in and was told by Sparky to bunt the ball. And he does. And, of course, there was a collision at home plate between Armbrister and Carlton Fisk. I'm just trying to get the pitchers involved in it. And it was Jim Willoughby on the mound. Fisk picked up the ball after he kind of, let's just say this, engaged. Red Sox fans will say that he was interfered with by Armbrister. The home plate umpire didn't see it that way. Larry Barnhart didn't see it that way. And he goes on. He pinch hits for Raleigh Eastwick, who becomes the winning pitcher in that game. He reached by an error on the catcher. Fisk throws the ball away. Geronimo moved the third. Armbrister moved the second. Roger Moret comes in to relieve Jim Willoughby. Roger Moret is one of those guys who had a promising career, and then he had some problems, and it's a shame. He definitely could have been kind of another Pedro, maybe an early Pedro, maybe a poor man's version of Pedro Martinez. That's how good his fastball was. And, of course, he had some other issues. But anyway, he comes in. He got Merv Redmond to pinch hit for Ken Griffey. So Sparky was playing the lefty-righty type of thing. He gets Merv Redmond to strike out. But then the next guy up, interestingly enough, is Joe Morgan. And with the bases loaded and 1 out, pounds a base hit to center field, bringing home Cesar Geronimo in that game. And the Reds win Game 3 of the World Series in 1975. They're up 2-1 and kind of control, really, the rest of the series by going up by that. But interestingly enough, I didn't realize this again. Morgan has that game-winning hit in the 10th inning. And in the 9th inning of Game 7 of that same series, gets a base hit to center also, kind of like a bloop, and scores, I believe, the winning run, Pete Rose. I believe it was Pete Rose, and I will look that up. But interestingly enough, Geronimo, who started off with a single, actually had a home run in this game. The Reds in 75, I didn't realize this, bench in that game had a home run. People forget all this, including me, and the home plate was Larry Barnett. And in that game, Rose had a triple, Bench had a homer, Dave Concepcion had a big home run, and Cesar Geronimo had a home run. And people don't realize this. In Game 6, Geronimo also homers to put the Reds up 6-3. Now, it didn't help them win that game, but it does set up ex-Red Bernie Carbo's 3-run bomb that ties that game and sends it into extra innings. Just such weird stuff. And it's Ed Armbrister, probably the most famous of the players from the Bahamas who have made the major leagues. The other guys on the list. So, and I wanted to get to Ed Armbrister. I also wanted to show you this. How wild is this? He actually had another rookie card. Take a look who's right next to him. You can't make this stuff up. That's Fred Lynn. And, of course, the two down there, Terry Whitfield. I actually think he wound up with the Giants. And Tom Poquette, who does play for the Royals. I also think he played for the Dodgers. That's his that's another rookie card, 1975. And this rookie card was 72. So maybe Armbrister sets the record for players from the Bahamas with most rookie cards. Who knows? The other guy I really wanted to talk about, there were two who really just had cup of coffee kind of careers. One was from the Nassau. I've been to Nassau in the Bahamas, lucky enough, fortunate enough. Guy by the name of Tony Curry spent 2 years in the major leagues with the Phillies. And why I kind of am bringing up his story, he hit in 1960, 6 homers, 34 RBIs, 261 batting average. But I give him credit. He actually balked at what the Phillies wanted to pay him. And of course, my information is from this time, my source is Wikipedia, and I think they had a newspaper that I was able to locate. He actually balked and kind of caused some problems for him and the club. And he was really, you could argue, never the same. I think they sent him down to the minor leagues, then brought him up, and he was never really the same player. But let's take a look at this. In 95 games in 1960, Tony Curry, one of the first players from the Bahamas, 634, 6 homers, 34 RBIs, 261 batting average. Not bad for, well, he's an outfielder. But if he is playing as a spot player, it's not too bad. And that was in 95 games, 6 homers, 34 RBIs. Meaning that if you gave him a full season, this is what Baseball Reference had for him. 8 homers, 50 RBIs, 246 if you gave him a full 162. Now, you can't make it as an outfielder with that. But if they had converted him maybe to a second baseman or an infielder, you could live with it, at least until you found something else, and then he becomes a position player. But I really think what hurt him was his salary negotiations with the Phillies at the time. And that's his picture right there. And of course, the fellow on the bottom with the Braves, his name was Wenty Ford. He was 1-2 with a 5.51 ERA. He actually has a positive WAR, 0.1. And he spent 1 year with Atlanta. Hey, if you told me you could have 3 decisions in the majors, it would be an under 500 record, and that would be your only season in the majors, I take it. Hey, I got a baseball picture. I got 16 innings, and people are talking about me on a cable TV show. That's not too bad. So that's Wenty Ford. The reason I brought him up was the Braves. That was actually the uniforms the Braves wore in the early 70s. And it was the Brave uniform that Aaron wore to break the Braves record. That logo, that look. I do love that script of the Braves. It's great. They still have that today in a darker version of blue. But the fella I really want to focus on, and I really thought he might have, when you take a look at his stats, fella by the name of Andre Rogers. I haven't forgot Jazz Chisholm. We may even talk about him as the year is progressing. Right now, he's got 4 homers and a 293 batting average. He is only 23, so he may have a pretty good career. Let's just see what in the rest of the season entails. Andre Rogers, though, was an infielder, shortstop for both the Pirates and the Cubs. Actually began his career with the Giants. Actually, he, at 22 years old, was a Giant in New York for 32 games, then travels west to the Golden State and plays with the Giants and Willie Mays and future Willie McCovey and Orlando Cepeda, then gets dealt to Chicago, where he has basically, well, I won't say that, he actually has his best season in 1964, and he was probably taking the place of Ken Hubbs, who had passed away, remember, in that plane accident. He had a 12-46 season, 12 homers, 46 RBIs, hit 239 for the Cubs. He did hit 266 for the Cubs in 1961 with 6 homers. He did wind up playing 11 years. His last years were with the Pirates. This might be a 66 picture, I'm not sure. Didn't really have a good career with the Pirates and was out of baseball by 1967 at age 32. But think about it. Spent 11 years in the majors, age 22 to 32. Really made a pretty good career of himself. And then I was reading, went back to the Bahamas and I think he worked in tourism and with the casinos. And that's Andre Rogers of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Chicago Cubs, one of 5 major league players from the Bahamas. This is Will O'Toole thanking you again for joining me, and a special shout out to Howard Fredericks, who always edits this so beautifully. Really appreciate it. Hope you join me next week with another Park Ridge Sports History show.